Greetings, everyone. We are going to be getting started in about a minute. We're just going to allow folks to be logging on. As you are getting ready, do know that there are two boxes that you can use. One is the chat box, and that is for you to speak to each other or to, just have a conversation among yourselves if you want to say where you're logging in from. But then there's a Q&A box that is for questions, and I will be talking a little bit about that. Okay, we're getting some good numbers. Okay, so we are at 3:01, so I am going to get us started. The panelists and all of you attend that we get this started correctly. Okay, so I'm Paz Artaza Regan. I am program manager at Catholic Climate Covenant, and I am excited about this webinar. Before we get started, I always give you a little bit of information of what we call the housekeeping. This webinar is being recorded, and a link will be sent to you within the next 24 to 48 hours, the link to the recording, that is. Please type your questions in the Q&A box, not the chat box. If you know which panelist the question is directed to, you may add that information to your question. Before we begin, we always start with prayer Covenant webinars. And for today, I'm thankful for Lucas, who was able to point me in the right direction. This beautiful prayer that was part of the address that His Holiness Pope Francis gave to the Economy of Francesco gathering in Assisi this past September 24th. So if you would center yourself, remember that we are in the presence of God at all times. In the name of the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit. Father, we ask forgiveness for having damaged the earth, for not having respected indigenous cultures, for not having valued and loved the poorest of the poor, for having created wealth without communion. Living God, who with your Spirit have inspired the hearts, hands, and minds of young people and sent them on the way to a promised land, look kindly on their generosity, love, and desire to spend their lives for a great ideal. Bless them, Father, in their undertakings, studies, and dreams. Accompany them in their difficulties and sufferings. Help them to transform their difficulties and sufferings into virtue and wisdom. Support their longings for the good and for life. Lift them up when facing disappointments due to bad examples. Do not let them become discouraged, but instead may they continue on their path. You, whose only begotten Son became a carpenter, grant them the joy of transforming the world with love, ingenuity, and hands. Amen. In the name of the Father, Son, and the Holy Spirit. At this point, I'm going to do a little bit of other things here. I am going to enable live transcript, and hopefully you'll be able to see the closed caption.
Did we lose you, Paz?
Today we've gathered an inspiring who've participated in the Economy of Francesco gatherings at Assisi, and who will share how they are living Laudato Si in their lives and in their work. They are enthusiastically responding to Pope Francis's call to build a new economy rooted in care for creation and to be protagonists of transformation. The format of today's webinar will be a dialogue between the panelists. Facilitating this conversation is Colin Gilbert. Colin has worked for many years with the Jesuits in education, migration, and justice initiatives. He now works at the nexus of education, technology, and climate justice, most recently building a platform for the ecological economics goal of the Laudato Si action platform. I asked Colin to facilitate because I really wish to anchor this conversation in the voices of the young people. People like Colin and his fellow panelists, Marta, Lucas, his colleague at the Francesco Collaborative, Kelly, and hopefully Mercy, who may be joining us in a few minutes. Now, the Francesco Collaborative is the group that convenes the Economy of Francesco movement in North America. So at this point, I am passing it on to Colin and to the panelists. I am going to step back. And so, Colin, you have the floor.
Yeah, all right. Thanks, Paz. And great to be with everyone today. Greetings from Miami, Florida, where I am based these days. I'm originally from the west of the US, but got dragged out here by my partner who works in climate science. I think, yeah, we're really excited today to kind of have a discussion about some of the things that happened at the Economy of Francesco Conference in Assisi, some of the things that have been building since the Pope wrote the letter several years ago that kind of started this movement, and then also some of the challenges and the hopes and the actions that are coming out of this. So what I'll do is I'll actually just start introducing the panelists. I'll then kind of share a couple more insights on what the conference was, where the movement's come, and then we'll have a discussion about, from the panelist experience, et cetera. So number one, Marta Evasani is joining us from Italy, and she's an Italian sustainability and economy for the common good consultant and a trainer for companies and schools. She's part of a group of consultants who try to break the rules to cultivate human organizations serving the common good, and she's vice president of Economy for the Common Good, Italy. She also co-founded a local association in her hometown to help the walk towards local sustainable development. Welcome, Marta.
Thank you.
Lucas de Jesus is a Brazilian entrepreneur passionate about education's potential to create positive change. Inspired by the Maker movement, the company he co-founded helps around 100,000 students with their social emotional development and technology literacy. He also collaborates with a startup accelerator that supports Brazilian tech entrepreneurs, and he's currently based in Italy as well, studying civil economy at the Sofia University, an institute inspired by the experience of the Communion of Focolare movement. We're hopeful that Mercy Chalatenek will join us from Nairobi. I know she was having some technical difficulties. She works in clean energy. If she makes it on, I'll do an introduction of her. And then we're also joined by Kelly, who's been organizing a lot, Kelly Regan-Hickey, and she'll chime in with some of the movements that have been happening in North America. So I think just a quick high level for, I know some folks on this webinar, I assume have heard about the Economy of Francesco. Perhaps some were at the conference, and I think just a quick start to kind of give a high level what it is and what it was, and I think to a certain level it's still in the process of being defined. However, it was in May 2019 when Pope Francis wrote a letter that was basically kind of stated that at the core of some of the social ills and the ills or the problem with what's happening with climate, et cetera, was a broken global economic system. And, basically inviting folks to reflect on that and try to find a way to make change happen. In that letter, I'll just share one quote that he wrote. He wrote, "I thought especially of inviting you young people because your desire for a better and happier future makes you even now a prophetic sign pointing towards an economy attentive to the person and to the environment." And so that came out in May 2019. I think this was also, he wrote in there how he was inspired by St. Francis of Assisi, who, was committed to accompanying the marginalized and in a sense, living out an alternative economic way of proceeding in his life. And so that for that reason, I think originally, and it was scheduled to be March 2020 when all of us were going to gather in Assisi to have an in-person event. Of course, the pandemic changed that, and the event did not happen at that time. However, there was a virtual event where, several groups were organizing and came and brought presentations, and some of the speakers who were slotted to speak presented. And I think even since then, before the event that happened in just a couple months ago, there's been a lot of organizing and initiatives that have been born out of this around the world. And so I think, alternative agricultural programs that came up out of Latin America. There's been a lot of research initiatives that have been born out of this. I think one thing we've been doing, I've been working with Kelly and several others here in the States, organizing workshops around how religious orders can divest some of their assets from fossil fuels and invest in a different way that's more, in mind of how do we support marginalized and care for creation. And so these are some of the things that have taken place in the last couple of years. And then finally, this past September, a couple thousand of us, young economists, entrepreneurs, activists, scholars, gathered in Assisi in Italy for a few days and had workshops, kind of collaborative sharing. Pope Francis gave a talk on the last day that was very inspiring. And I think today we brought a few people together to kind of share some of their insights from their experience in this conference and some other pieces. So I think I'll first open this up to our panel. And first question that I'll kind of just allow each panelist to share about briefly, and then we'll go into more of a dialogue. But what were some of your takeaways, Lucas and Marta, from the recent Economy of Francesco Conference in Assisi? And then how are you and your community, the organizations you work with, taking some of the principles from the Economy of Francesco and Laudato Si and putting them into action? So takeaways and some of the things that your work has inspired. And I'll actually, I'll hand the mic to Lucas to start.
Nice. Thanks, Colin. So happy to be with you all here, sharing and learning with you with this community as well. I was rereading the message of Pope Francis during the event, and I took a quote to start, and just to make the point that my key takeaway from Assisi was in terms of amplifying and connecting different trajectories, like people that were already in this direction, but now they are in the same community. And in the Pope's words, he said, when a young person sees in another young person the same calling, and this experience is repeated with hundreds, even thousands of other people, the great things become possible. Even the hope of changing an enormous and complex system like the world economy. So for me, we can discuss more about what it generates in terms of more practical ways in my life, in my work. But to start, I would keep this forming a community of people in the same vocation, the same calling among the world.
Should I go?
Yeah, sure.
Okay. So yeah, in my case, there's a kind of a refrain of chorus that was there all the time, and it was we are still in the night, but the dawn will come. And in my case, I had the feeling we saw the dawn, actually, because I think that the best part of our society was there. I mean, not because the best people was there, but because really we were there with all our heart and ideas to make this possible. And this is, I mean, exactly what I was looking for, a little bit of hope and ideas. And this is also actually what I see in my organization, in the Economy for the Common Good, trying to apply in the values of the Economy of Francesco and the Laudato Si, because I see all the time companies that really try to apply these values to the way they do business. And the Economy for the Common Good a global movement that try to put sustainability and the environment and humanity in the way we do the economy and we do business. And through this special thing that is the matrix for the common good, we really help companies to wonder how they start the journey, to have a good impact on the world. So I saw the dawn there, but I can see the dawn in the companies I'm working with, and this is what is my takeaway from there.
Thanks, Marta. I think, or just one thing, Marta, to kind of, if you can kind of flesh out for the folks who are on, a bit more detail about the work that you do with the economy of common good, and yeah, how you've been, concretely working with organizations to put these principles into practice.
Yeah. So yeah, the economy for the common good, as I was saying, is a global movement trying to put the environment and caring about people in the economy. We deal with profit and non-profit organizations, with schools, and with the public sector. And we have a specific tool that is the matrix, the common good matrix, to do so. You should have in mind really a matrix. It's a table, and there are columns in this table, and there are values. So the first value is human dignity, the second value is solidarity, and the third one is sustainability, environmental sustainability, and the fourth one is transparency and democracy. And then we have rows in the table, and rows are stakeholders. So we have suppliers in an organization, and we have financial partners and employees and clients and competitors, and also the social context around us. And the idea of this matrix is that from the intersection between a value and a stakeholder, a topic raises, and this topic should be tackled by companies and organizations in general in order to be sure to have a good impact on humanity and the planet. And so what we are doing with companies is to help them traveling through this matrix, through this common good matrix, and self-assess themselves in a score out of 2,000 points in order to figure out how much they are contributing to the common good. And this score then can be used by consumers, for instance, to choose the best companies, the companies that are really giving a good impact. And also, for instance, from the public sector, to choose companies they want to work with because they have less negative externalities and more positive externalities. So what I'm doing all the time is to really take the hands of these companies and go with them along the path of the matrix and help them preparing their common good balance sheet.
Yeah, appreciate that, Marta. And it kind of, I think one thing, Marta and I ran into each other at the conference, and I think spoke for probably an hour about how this model could be scaled globally, and how to really, in a sense, incentivize, and if not kind of pressure companies to actually go through this process. And we know this movement has begun. I'm thinking in a bit more of a North American context, but how over time can policies be put into place that really push organizations and companies to adopt these ESG kind of practices. So I appreciated that. Yeah, Lucas, I feel like perhaps on the same thread, some of your work and how, or other inspired moments that you had at the conference, or how some of this is related to your life and work.
Nice, great, man. I will try to return to your also the word that you used before, the challenge. I think it resumes a little bit what I'm trying to study right now and articulating community. But just to give a little step back, and I want to tell a little bit how I get there in Economy of Francesco. I think it's meaningful for a lot of us in terms of understanding how our personal realities brought us together and can give energy to the long run. Yeah, basically, I'm Brazilian. Was born in a very small city in the countryside of the state of São Paulo. Always dreamed to be an inventor and changing the world somehow. I started this startup in education because I was kind of frustrated because of my formal education, and that was It was an interesting thing because it all started with a lot of purpose, kind of ingenuity as well. And after 6 years working as entrepreneur, we started having some great outcomes in the business. So we were working with more than 100 people in our team. We got some investments. We were working with a lot of students in the whole country. But somehow I saw my work as entrepreneur becoming from purpose and wanting to change the world to managing numbers, right? So, and also understanding that impact would be growing the fastest we can with good financials. And of course, it's important to be this, but it's not the main goal, right? And so in 2020, when the Economy of Francesco started, I was just personally crashed with a big dilemma in terms of I saw my entrepreneurial role becoming or turning throughout the year, the time from purpose to numbers. I was having an interesting and a professional moment, but at the same time, my country was on fire. We had almost 1 million deaths by COVID from COVID. Also, a friend of mine, very close friend of my youth, parish movement, and poverty rates raising after decades, and so on. So the main question for me was, what is my role as entrepreneur from listening to the call of the Pope, right? And so I understood that I needed to review my understanding of economics. What is a good economic system? What is a good business? And that led me to Economy of Francesco. That led me to Italy to study economics here at Sophia University, and so on. So the main challenge for me from this perspective of entrepreneurs is to move from the mindsets that the mainstream system can let us. So when I talk with my friends, entrepreneur friends, about impact, changing the world, or making good, we kind of end up always in a trap of mainly two different paradigms. The first one is what we call the benevolent power. So it's the belief that if you want to do some good in the world, you have to be powerful. So if just people with a lot of money, a lot of influence, do things in the world in this our moment of capitalism system, so you have to be powerful in order to do something. And I can remember a friend of mine, entrepreneur, stuck on this. He loves education, and he asked me, Lucas, do you think that I have to stop working with my passion, working with education, and maybe start a bank? And maybe I can be a billionaire one day, and so I can do good for the world. And it's a moment of reflection, right? So to understand from this perspective of Pope Francis. And the other paradigm, just to synthesize, is the paradigm of the benevolent business. So we see business mainly today in the mainstream model, or the good it can do, generating profit. And the second one, the maximum, generating some corporate social responsibility, right? Or we can see it today as ESGs and so on. All of this is good, but the limit generally is I will do something good for the world just if it's good for the business, from my strategic business perspective. And we can build economy of Francesco, economy more human, if we don't enter in a deep ethical commitment with our communities, an intrinsic motivation. So I think that for me, the challenge is kind of go beyond these two paradigms and create new narratives or new ways of understanding what is a good economy, what is a good business, and what is my role as entrepreneur in order to build these new narratives, these new stories as humankind.
Yeah. Very much appreciate that, Lucas. I think, one thing I'm struck by is not only building the new narrative and kind of the imagination, but the reflection on what is your role and what is our role. And I think, how does our vocation relate to this? And so I think that's been a big piece of this for me, is especially just identifying like how to change my life and kind of, in a sense, listen deeper to how, I might not be called to just participate in the status quo. And I think just a quick sharing, and I think Lucas and I connected on this in a powerful way, is that I lost a friend in the beginning of this, which in a sense inspired my commitment. It was weeks after the Pope put out this letter that in 2019, that I gathered a small group of people on Zoom. This was long before the pandemic. And I just had this idea of what if we got on Zoom and kind of prayed for 25-30 minutes and did a meditation, and then also shared about structural economics and how our role in that. And so these were a group of 5 people working in the cooperative movement, one of them in the Obama administration, another doing alternative economics and health. And we did this kind of prayer, and then reflection, and said, as opposed to going with the status quo, how do we move into this and live into this? And then some of you might be familiar with Felipe Witschker and Elizabeth Carlo, who were on that call, who started doing a lot more organizing especially in North America around this. One of our friends on that call was Patrick Hidalgo, who hours after we left a reflection at his apartment, where we were actually doing a reflection on St. Francis of Assisi's life and his commitment to flipping the world upside down, is actually the quote that G.K. Chesterton uses in one of his texts of Francis's vision of that. And he passed away of COVID within 24 hours of that, that's what was believed at the very beginning of the pandemic. And so this inspired us to not only, he was an activist, and he was moving in this path of downward mobility, and he had planned to be at the conference with us. And so out of that, I think, a lot of some of the organizing that was kind of born from that. I think I'll actually invite Kelly Regan Hickey, who's on the call, who actually was not at the conference, but has been working closely with the Francesco Collaborative, which is one of the big pieces that was kind of born out of North America in this process. And so, Kelly, I'll let you perhaps give a short intro of yourself as well, and then share some of that work.
Thank you so much for bringing me on, Colin. It's a delight to be here with all of you. And I also want to sit kind of in the gravity of that story you shared, and just like recognize that young people convening small communities, there are such amazing ideas that can come from that, and that can become action. And that's really the team that I found with Francesco Collaborative. So it's really great to hear that origin story. But my name is Kelly Regan. I am currently the Director of Operations and Formation for the Francesco Collaborative. And we run workshops mostly for investors here in the States, but also internationally, who are interested in moving their finances in a way that is more aligned with their faith and their values. So really our work comes down to the idea of conversion, which I think is so deeply rooted in the Economy of Francesco, and then also in Laudato Si, which we draw a lot of our inspiration from. And thinking too, I think the Economy of Francesco itself is a really broad thing. There are economic roots, I think, to so many of the crises we face. And when we think of economics, there's a lot that's wrapped up in there. So when I think of our work specifically at Francesco Collaborative, I think of finance, the way that finance piece fits into economics. So we really look for investors of faith-based institutions, also others who are not part of faith-based institutions, who really are questioning kind of their portfolios, their investment holdings, and wondering what options do we have when it comes to impact investing? How can we better align our portfolio with our values? So we convene small communities in workshops of these investors who are in the process of thinking about these questions, who might even be thinking about them for the first time. There's just a wide range of people and different journeys. And we sit with these questions. Our workshop really follows the See, Judge, Act model, where we look and we see the structural kind of the structures that we're sitting in economics. We think of our paradigms of maximization and efficiency at all cost. And then we think of Catholic social teaching, and we think of just the beautiful vision of life that calls us into as human beings and as investors. And then we explore different ways and strategies for moving our boards, moving our colleagues into a place where we can consider impact investing. So one of the questions I think was a really good one about making it not only about divestment, but also about looking for alternative investments that are just profoundly rooted in our CST values. And those can be cooperatives, those can be a million different things. And I think really what the Economy of Francesco has shown us is there are people doing amazing things all over the world, and we have the power to invest in them. And just figuring out who they are, what they're up to, that takes a lot of work, but they're out there, and just sitting together in community and asking these questions and hearing from people that are doing this great work is just a fantastic opportunity. So it's really cool to get to convene these spaces. We're hoping to put some information in an email following this about upcoming workshops for us. But yeah, that's a little bit about Francesco Collaborative.
Yeah, thanks for sharing that, Kelly. So I think, this has already been shared a little bit, but just going back to this question of what are some of the greater challenges you see in moving this movement forward, or perhaps in your own work of trying to live out these principles? And then also, where are some of the spaces or the directions where you're seeing hope, where there's actions or evidence or just pieces that are giving you hope? And I'll just kind of open the floor for whoever feels inspired.
Maybe I can start concerning one challenge that I realized when I was there in Assisi. I was in my village. It was the Vocation and Profit village. And I realized I was sitting with all English-speaking people. There was only one guy from Burkina Faso that wasn't speaking English, and he was just speaking French. So I was helping a little bit out with translation. And I realized the whole focus we gave to our village, Vocation and Profit, was really, from a really similar perspective. We were people from all over the world because there were people from the Americas and the Europe and Asia, etc. But in the end, it was all people that could come there and could join the process. And there was just one or two people from Africa, and however they could be there. So they could be part of the process. And there was a person with a language barrier that could not really participate and bring his perspective in, that was quite different from ours. And this was the moment when I realized that we did a great job already. But on the other hand, the process has still to evolve in a way to involve all the people that have really no voice. And I have a little bit the feeling that what we are doing, what we have done until now as Economy of Francesco, is a little bit, again, one perspective of people that have voice. And yeah, we should try to find a way, I don't know how, really to try to involve other voices that have no voice at this moment. So yeah, this is my challenge.
Appreciate that, Marta.
Yeah, I think I can share something that gave me hope. It was interesting that after the event, I started talking with some friends, some entrepreneur friends and people working with business that were not from the Economy of Francesco or even movement related. And we started to discussing similar things, you know, like just because I gave this openness or started the conversation, putting some discussions in this direction, I saw many people, much more than I imagined, around me, worried about the same issues. Let's say I can remember a conversation that I had with a business colleague. He was thinking about opening an NGO and maybe turning his career to non-profit, and it was unimaginable for me before. Another one that was a guy working with investments, worried about who will finance innovations that are not a good market opportunity but necessary for the society, as governments has limited capital to invest in long-term innovations and so on. So it was interesting to see that I can form a community of action with people that I was not imagining before. And discussing with some of these people, this community of entrepreneurs that I'm trying to get together to discuss these things, I came up with three reflections that are giving me hope, or three ways of understanding or perspective. The first one is inspired by Economy of Francesco and, of course, the Catholic social teaching and so on. The first one is instead of being the solution himself, an entrepreneur is a part of a community that heals some reality, right? So it's like fostering a community, an agency, trying to renounce to this individualistic attempt to save the world alone. I remember seeing a friend of mine starting a social business in Brazil, and he was saying publicly, if we can't reach 5 million students in 5 years, we are going to be a fail. And I was like, why, man? You know, like we can't let that this selfish way of building usual business that we are seeing, that we use the same mindsets for building new business. So the second one is, instead of maximizing own benefits, pursuing the shared benefits. And here I'm talking about a relationship of reciprocity with the business team, other stakeholders. We saw a good, interesting example of the founder of Patagonia in this, maybe the last month, that donated basically his shares or all the shares of the company to an NGOs. It's an act of communion, it's an act of sharing. We can see also the economy of communion enterprises that exercise these relationships of reciprocity in the market with a sign of hope. And the third fact for me is understanding business as a common good. So well beyond a private ownership of shareholders, is to understand that a business is an organization formed by people in a relationship with a community. So success is about shared success between the business and the communities that this organization touches. So yeah, I think these some examples that I gave gives me hope. These new understandings coming clearly from the Catholic social teaching, Economy of Communion, the Pope Francis encyclicals, and so on. So this clear vision of what is a good economy, what is a good business, gives me hope. And I really think that we need to build upon this to tell another stories about economy, to tell another stories about business, and what is success and what is happiness, what is community, to these new generations of entrepreneurs as well, that we are educating right now, that we are in touch right now and supporting right now.
Yeah, I think one thing I resonate with what Lucas shared is one of the hats I wear in life is working with technology startups, and that are not really in the Catholic religious oriented world. And since this, I've had so many conversations with entrepreneurs, with folks who resonate fully with the messages that Pope Francis and a lot of the ideas that have kind of come out of this. And I think it's been interesting to not just to take this outside of just faith movements and into the rest of the world. I think one other piece that, as Marta shared, I think, one thing that I thought was actually that struck me from the conference of the couple thousand participants, I'd say I only met around 30 folks from the US, which I think was perhaps a powerful reality that did help a different perspective kind of bubble up more. I think in the US, we have a perspective on what a new economy is. I think there's a huge role in the US to do investing different, to move large sums of money, et cetera, on this realm. But I think even just to bring in voices from the rest of the world, at one who will disproportionately be affected by climate, and the disasters that will cause, and then also just to give a different mode of thinking. And so I think, just from the conference, I think the number one population was likely Italians, but a close second were Brazilians. There was a large number of Brazilians there, and I actually had almost a different experience than Marta, where I was in a small group once where everybody was speaking Portuguese, and we had people, like a couple people translating to us, and it was, I'm fluent in Spanish, but was trying to pick up pieces. And anyway, so I think there was there could be definitely a higher voice in that space, but I think this was one piece that, especially compared to a lot of conferences in other parts of the world that have one idea, this had a lot of creativity to it. So all right, I think I've seen a lot of questions in the chat that I've kind of been processing, and we'll have a bit of time at the end of this. I wanted to just give, I know some people might be dropping off, and I've also seen in the chat, what are some calls to action in this, or what are some next steps? I see this last question in the Q&A here was this event a one-time thing, or is it a movement that other people can join? If so, how? And so I think, at least this event, I don't, in terms of an international convening, I don't think that's been announced. I believe there was something, in the last 10 days or so, there was another convening with several folks in Latin America. I think a few hundred people met in Argentina, in Buenos Aires, to have a kind of a follow-up to this. I think, but with that said, just some thoughts from Pano or Paz or anybody else on what are some, if so, how, like how can people take action on this? And I'll share one thing after I open it up.
Okay, so basically we are split in 12 different villages, and every village is a kind of tension between an economic concept and the value, a human value. So for instance, for me, it was vocation and profit, and then the profit, and there was finance and humanity, or I don't know, management and gift, etc., etc. And so for sure, villages are open, and I think there are information on the website to join villages that continue working and meeting together, even online. So it is possible to join the process through villages, or it is possible to join a local hub. So you may find the nearest hub to your place and try to join them. I guess in this case is Colin is the best one to talk about this. And yeah, and I think it was actually announced a gathering in 2 years from now. So I think it will be there, yeah, in 2 years again.
Yeah, I appreciate, Diana, you corrected me, and Marta. So there was an announcement that I must have missed, that there will be another event in the next 2-3 years. Yeah, so I don't know, Lucas, Kelly.
Yeah, I can share quickly, just to give some examples. During the village that me and Marta were participating, Profit and Vocation, 2 projects that are running there. For example, one is a podcast, so called the Profit Podcast. If you wanna, if anyone wants to look for it, to share stories of different people building their professional lives, between this equilibrium between profit and vocation and purpose. The second one was some sessions sessions in group to discuss, to collectively help some folks in order to overcome the challenges in putting together profit, let's say, and vocation. So it's a way of learning from the stories of others and trying to help them. During the event, I saw a group forming to study and to produce some academic papers around the responsibility, the role of governments in this process, based on an economist called Mariana Mazzucato, which has a very interesting work around this issue. So, I mean, from my perspective, Economy of Francesco is not restricted to the people that were in the event, definitely. And I can see this Pope Francis way of doing things that is better than occupying spaces. It's giving movement, right? So giving energy to movement and so on. So right now for me, Economy of Francesco is a lot of different groups trying to rearrange and working in some interesting common topics. There are these events that guarantee a pacing in what is happening. But yeah, I think we definitely don't want to see it as a restriction in a group or a self-identity, a part of everything else that are happening in the church and so on.
Yeah, one quick follow-up on that. I think originally the conference was for 35 people 35 years or younger, but in reality, I crossed that threshold during the 2 years since it was supposed to be scheduled. And I think, I mean, there was a lot of folks at the conference who were above that age. So I think it's, of course, it was like geared at the idea of a calling of youth and to think creatively. But we've seen a lot of all generations who have been participating in this. Hey, Kelly, you want to share?
I can jump in next. Just a brief word, I think, about the Francesco Collaborative workshops that we have coming up. That's a good way to get involved too. So we've been facilitating, they're about 3 to 4 week virtual workshops that try and create space for dialogue about the limited opportunities afforded by conventional finance and how those really constrain our ability to live our faith. And then also to dream about what we have to build in order to bring about a faith-first finance. So a lot of our content, as I mentioned, is rooted in Pope Francis' call on Laudato Si, to hear the cry of the earth and the cry of the poor. And our next workshop will be in 2023, in March of 2023. So I'll drop in a little interest form if anybody is interested in learning more. But we really welcome you, wherever you are on your journey, to join us in thinking deeply about what it means to align our finances with our values and to seek a new vision of economics and finance that really is truly faith first. So Paz will also follow up with some more information. But if you have any questions, please fill out this form or send me an email, and be delighted to get in touch.
Thank you, Kelly. Yes, I'm going to be sharing a slide in a second here when I get my computer all set up here. So for further information, we do have, for more information, you can email the Covenant website. There's also the We Are All Part of God's Planet campaign website, godsplanet.us. This is a website that was created to accompany the U.S. Catholic community, all 7 sectors of the U.S. Catholic community, one of which is the economic sector. And within there, we do put in the stories. We want to lift the stories of U.S. Catholic that are working on economic issues, that are working in the Economy of Francesco arena, and be able to lift those stories, because that's really what folks are hungry for. They want to know what others are doing so they can also replicate. And the other one I want to leave for Colin to talk a little bit about, and that's Faith Invest.
Yeah. So I think just one other project has been work that I've been working on, especially in the past year, is the ecological economics goal of the Laudato Si action platform. And so it's been a collaboration between the Laudato Si movement and an organization called Faith Invest that's based in Europe that helps religious orders around the world think about, number one, divesting from fossil fuels, their assets, but also, as this was mentioned in the chat earlier, doing impact investing a bit more radically in relation to care for creation. And so I'll just put in the chat here, and as Paz will send it by email as well. But this is a kind of a complementary site where we've built several resources for kind of targeting more at religious orders and thinking about moving their assets around differently. Wherever you might be on the journey in this, what I just put in the chat there has some resources to reflect on where you are, case studies on organizations that are, starting this or a bit further down the pipeline in terms of implementing this, and then also some prayer resources to kind of, do reflection on how your community may be able to live that out further. I think, as Kelly mentioned, one thing that we've seen is, not only resources, but these workshops that we've been supporting, in a sense, kind of catalyze behavior change. I think some of you might have experienced in this your own life. I saw this there's another question that came up, was like, I'm busy doing, trying to do my own work, support family. How do we have time to actually kind of live into this a bit more radically? One thing we've seen, and I'm not saying this is the only answer, but the workshops that we've been running are basically bringing communities of folks together who are reflecting on this, and then almost in a sense keeping one another accountable. So they're designed on in a sense, Seth Godin's alternative MBA, where it's like write, reflect, and then in a sense be part of a community that's pushing this. And I think this has been a theme shared tonight of, right, and especially in North America, this isn't always the main focus. The culture that we swim in is not always lending towards the vision that Pope Francis has called us to build a new economy. And so how do we build communities where, we transform that culture, where we root those values in our everyday lives and don't just get sucked into the status quo way of proceeding. And so these are just a few ways that we can live these out. I think, I don't know, any other thoughts on that? And I think perhaps we can spend the last few minutes on Q&A. But any other thoughts or reflections on next steps or the evolving calls to action?
One of the questions that I kind of saw we woven in the Q&A and in the chat sometimes, if you're an individual, how do you get connected to this movement? Like a young person in the US, how do they connect to the Economy of Francesco movement? If you're an older person, how do you support that movement? And third, how would parishes, for example, be able to connect with these issues?
I'll share one thing on the individual, at least, is I again, as Lucas mentioned, this is an evolving movement. I received an email 2 days ago that was basically kind of who are point people in the different regions. Folks are interested. We'll share our emails. You can email us and we'll just CC you on that thread. They're trying to gather there's a doodle going around for a meeting that's happening in the next week or two, where folks from around the world who are in a sense kind of point people for some of the different chapters that are growing the Economy of Francesco. So we can just loop you into that, and that's one possibility. Yeah, other ideas for you mentioned parishes, Paz, and what was the other?
The young people that want to get connected, older adults that want to support it.
Yeah, I see this moment as individual in terms of go for a community that you can work with. So I would say the same for people that want to support in terms of find communities around the Economy of Francesco, Laudato Si, and so on, that you want to support. We have these national hubs as well. That is a good way to do that. In terms of donations, I probably in the official website, there is also a call for donations as well in the website.
Thanks.
Yeah, I think adults as young as well. I mean, the call is for all. So I don't think adults should support and young people should do, but I think we should all do. So I'm expecting to older people the same courage we are showing in our lives. So just quit your jobs if they are meaningless and do something purposeful in your life, as we are trying to do. That's the only thing to do for me.
Marta, I loved a quote that I read that Pope Francis had said, make a ruckus. And make a ruckus, the translation, I'm not sure what it would have been in Italian, but it's really get up there and shout loudly. We need to get together, young and old, and together shout loudly. Yeah, make a ruckus.
Awesome.
I also love, Colin, what you had said too about just kind of taking that agency and initiative seriously, about even calling together a couple of friends, colleagues who are interested in these questions, and just start to have those conversations, start to dive into books and resources that are about an alternative vision of economics. I think like having those conversations too on a smaller scale is really meaningful, and it can bubble up into great things. So just realizing, I think, your own agency in this movement too, is you have the power to convene, and that's really exciting.
Say I'm inspired by Linda and James's comments in the chat here of no matter what your age, you're still active in pushing this forward, and also I appreciate Gilbert's get informed, be part of the conversation, engage in advocacy on behalf of the planet. So yeah, I think that there's an invitation for all generations to be part of this. I also I assume many of you are familiar with Bill McKibben's work, and I know he's got this the third act where he's kind of like mobilizing the for lack of a better word, the elderly generations to
over 60
over 60 to continue to take action in this, and I do think one thing, especially in North America, to transform finance, to how do we really do this in a way that expedites this conversion to a clean energy economy, and it needs some radical actions from where how investments and money is moving in finance. So I know that's a big piece that we've been working on, and I just put in the chat that's Bill McKibben, the third act org that he's mobilizing communities on. So
well,
all right,
I think we're there, almost at the top of the hour. Thank you. I can't show my appreciation in any other way but to say thank you to all of you. I want to also sort of say to our attendees that when I heard this group as we were planning, the thought that came through my mind was, if we are going to leave the world to people like these panelists, the world will be all right. We can trust that they've got it. They know what they're doing, and they're going to be able to do the right thing. And so I appreciate them coming here and inspiring us. It is now almost 4 o'clock. So here in the DC area, we will be closing the webinar. An email with the recording will be sent to you either tomorrow or Friday. I will include the links that have been shared in the chat, as well as any websites and emails from the panelists that they are going to share with me. Anything else, Colin?
yeah, I think just one thing that came to mind was you say, us young people are clearly working on this, as our futures fully depend on this, but we definitely appreciate everyone's collaboration and keeping this planet from getting so hot that our work becomes that much harder. So yeah, thanks for being here today. Thanks for all the insights. I believe emails will go out, so feel free to ping us with any thoughts or ideas. And yeah, very much thankful for your participation and presence today.
Thank you.
And actually, last thing, thanks to the panelists who stayed up late across the Atlantic, and for them sharing their insights. And we were bummed that we didn't have Mercy from Nairobi here, but hopefully we'll plug her in on another one of these.
Maybe we can do a second one. Yes. Thank you. Blessings to all. Bye-bye.
Peace.